I'd like to call this meeting to order. Will you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming this evening. The first order of business is, or I should just say all members are present except for Mike Murray. I'd like to appoint Lee Shimmick as acting clerk in his absence. Are there any objections to that? It's not a vote. Okay. Moving on, we have the approval of this evening's agenda. Do I have a motion to approve that as presented? Moved. By Tom, second.
Second.
By Todd. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? That motion carries 6-0. We have on the consent agenda this evening the check wire transfer and disbursement summary, our bank reconciliation statement, resignations and non-renewals as presented. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
By Stacy, second.
Second.
By Lee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 6-0. And we have Laker Pride.
Yes. Laker
Showcase, sorry.
Yes. Cindy Solberg is here with Jane Balo from Jeffers Pond to give you a snapshot into what's going on at Jeffers Pond Elementary. Good evening. Thanks for having us here. Jane Balo is our Synergy Coordinator, and tonight we'd like to tell you a little bit about challenging students to meet their growth potential, and especially our gifted and talented students. You've seen already from presentations that other building principals have done the paper pencil kind of data warehouse that we have generated and are using this year so that we put down our MCA scores from students. We now have Ames web data through third grade that we track, MAP data. We have a Fontes and Pinnell fluency test that we now provide for our students. The little numbers that you see across the top, and I don't expect you to see every single one, but we have two numbers that we really look at, and you've probably heard about that from other principals too. The first one being the number that would put students at about the 50th percentile, and the second number is the 25th percentile. And we naturally would like our students as close to either meeting or exceeding that 50th percentile, and would like them then, if they're 25% or below, to hopefully receive those intervention services with Power Half Hour, which you've heard about from other principals. One of the ways we can progress monitor students is not only with Ames Web, but also with our MAP test. And because Ames Web only goes up through third grade so far, especially for our grades 3, 4, and 5, including our gifted and talented clusters, we really look to that MAP test to gauge progress during the year. We can generate a student goal-setting worksheet. You see an outline of one here for any student that we want. The NWEA testing is very nice in that all we have to do is type in the student's name, and it will actually fill all those cells for us. So it will tell the subtest strengths that a student has. It will tell the goal areas that are the areas maybe where we would like to see a little bit more progress for students. When Jane saw that I was talking about this at a staff meeting in the fall, wanting to make sure that we did follow the progress of all of our students throughout the year, she came to me and she said, well, I think we ought to be tracking our gifted and talented students just the way you're tracking to watch those students who are only at the 25th percentile or below, because we need to be sure that we have challenging activities for them and that they're meeting their growth potential just as much as some of our struggling learners are. So she asked if she could have the same data warehouse sheets as everybody else, but track specifically students in her Synergy cluster. And I said, definitely, we would want to do that. So that's exactly what she did. She used MAP tests, the MAP test as her sort of growth measurement. So in the fall, for instance, we would see, here's a one Synergy students, we would see They had a RIT score of 222 in reading in the fall. Our NWA again generates for us a student who has a RIT score in the fall of 222 already. We would expect them typically to grow about 3 RIT points by spring. So when we give that NWA MAP test again in the winter, we can look at their RIT, and here if you notice this student scored already 228, so by winter this student had actually exceeded what we expected them to by spring, so obviously they're making very nice growth. If you notice in math, they were at 234, but hadn't quite made what we would expect for their half-year growth. With a spring typical growth of 6, we would hope to see them making 3 RIT points, and there they made 2, so not quite as much of growth on the math. So this is what Jane would look at for all of her students to see if her gifted and talented students are meeting their growth targets just the same as some of our struggling learners. Naturally, we have the Power Half Hour and all the different interventions you've heard about already from students who are struggling learners. So Jane would like to just give you a little snapshot of some of the things she does to challenge our more gifted and talented students.
Okay, hi. A new look for Synergy. The reason that all of this came about as of last year with the opening of Sage Academy. And so, of course, that took our top first 1, 2, 3%, and it allowed us to say, okay, we have Synergy students, and the way that we always identified them, it was more the overall growth I'm on to my second part. It was more than, we looked at the overall gifted. So it wasn't just a math student that was really very talented, and it wasn't just a language arts student, say reading, that they were talented in. We would look at the whole score in order for them to be identified as Synergy students. So because our level 1s is what we used to call them, most of them chose to go to Sage Academy. And that made me start thinking like, what are we going to do? And we had many meetings and talked about it with Pam Winfield and so on. And it was like, well, what best could we do? So we still continue to cluster the students like we always had. And a cluster simply means you have 2, 3, 4, 5. It depends on your grade level. You might have 2 cluster classrooms. It's really has been studied. It's the best thing to do is to cluster your students, meaning the group of 5 or 6 in a classroom. They tend to bond with one another. They're able to kind of challenge one another, and it's great for the teacher because then she kind of has this group, and then she would have a different group. So we continue to do that, but we had open Sage, so now we're going to look at, let's do focusing on the specific talent areas, which we were not able to do before. And it was really difficult because not only did the parents know most of the time, I would also notice, with a student and say, absolutely, they are so talented in math, but our criteria right now for Synergy is that they have to be overall. We look at the total OLSAT score. It allowed us to give that time and say, okay, I'm going to just look at math students, and then I'm going to look at the language arts students. So what we did is we opened it up, so it was reaching more students. And when I say open it up, we opened it up to the 3rd grade, not identified students. It was just talented students. And the teachers would look at the math scores, and the recommendation was to do at least 95% or above, because we wanted to have it still challenging. If they did that, but it was also, if the students were able to reach that, it was also allowed, though, if a teacher came to me and would say, so-and-so just really is doing very well, I think that, we should have him or her in the class. Sure. And, we tried to keep it, maybe 14 students, and I would work with them then in math, or I'd have a language arts group. So it was wonderful to reach more students. New fame being here, thank you. And just to give you a little bit of an example, what I did with the literature group, you can see that we're sitting in a circle, and the reason for that was our main focus using touch pebbles was to read a short little article, story. Usually it had some hidden or a meaning that they had to infer as to what really does this story come to a conclusion. So we would read it, talk about it, and discuss it. And what I was hoping for is that those students, were able to inform, inference, but also have a discussion format that many of the teachers would say, oh, this is great, because oftentimes the students, you'd ask them a question and they'd say yes, no, answer the character's name, but there was no in-depth discussion. So that was the purpose of these literature groups, that we were hoping that they would grow and we would see growth in their ability to have discussions while also inferring and learn how to be a participant in a discussion group. Also, just have their individuality of answering the questions, not just to agree because so-and-so, when you ask a question and, somebody raises their hand and then everybody looks around, they're all raising their hand. So that was the purpose of that. Another thing that we did that was really wonderful, and we've done this before, but it did allow more students, like we said, we worked with the stock market game. This was, they were given a virtual $100,000. I think they, at the beginning, thought that, I was going to give them $100,000, I wish, and that they were on the computer, and what you can just see here in the pictures, they're looking up, they're trying to decide, what would be a good stock, and we played it starting in January, and they would have to go in, they had to buy, they had to sell, they learned what a stock was. We would talk about, well, yes, there is a commission, but here, they're pulling a commission, and it was a straight across the board. And then I have 2 students there. You can see they learned how to look in the newspaper, look for the top gainers, maybe losers. Should we or shouldn't we? They had to learn how to work as a group, as a team, and they would have to majority rule. And, I can remember I'd have a student, say, but I don't want to buy this, or, I don't want to sell. Well, you have 5 in your group, 2 to 3, maybe you can try to encourage them not to, but give them reasons. So that was the purpose of the stock market game. And then we had practicing, we were doing the math Olympiads. This is higher level thinking. I must say that this is one of my favorites, but so many students just love it because it isn't your, and I'm not saying that this is what they do necessarily in class, but it allowed me to expand it, make the story problems more challenging, or how do you go through, what strategies do you use? I usually would start it out with a brain teaser, and then we would do it in different ways, work in partners, work alone, work in a group, boys against girls, they always enjoyed that one. And we would try to see what strategies we use and can we get, the answer, and it was many, many, many steps, to these problems. The most important thing that I believe that came out of this was they understood and they learned new strategies, but they saw that just because, say, Cindy did it this way, that doesn't mean that Eric has to do it the same way, but can get, a different, or get the same answer or get the same conclusion. And I really feel that they have grown. You can see that over here, let's see here. Anyway, the boys are, they have something here that they are working on. That's how I usually started it. It was called a brain teaser. So I decided that you needed a brain teaser tonight to see if you're really thinking and stretch your brain a little bit. So as you can see, it says, the first one, 5 plus 5 plus 5 equals 550. And it says, add 1 straight line to the above to make the sum correct.
Does not equal.
Okay. Can I have? Will this work?
Yeah.
I won't make you struggle too long, and I will tell you that I actually did have students that figured this out, but of course we had a little bit more thinking time. But all you have to do is, and I'm sorry, because of this, it really is supposed to.
Red. Would it help?
Okay, so we just go like this. I'm not connecting it really well, but you can see what I've done is I made one straight line, and so now I've made that number 545 plus 5 equals 550. Okay? We'll do the next one. What 5-letter word becomes shorter when you add 2 letters to it? Oh, all right. Okay, now let's see.
You skipped the second one.
You know what?
No, I just.
Oh, they were already
Yeah, they were,
previewing
yeah.
it. Okay, well, I saw Todd's hand go up first. So Todd, the answer?
Short.
Excellent, very good. You were stretching the brain and firing off those brain cells. Okay, so excitingly, what I did with, after, discussing this with Cindy, it's so many different numbers and whatnot. So we just decided to concentrate on one grade level at one of my schools at Jeffers. And so what I did is I looked at where they were, what was the RIT growth, typical growth at the end of the year, what was expected. And as you can see, the first one says % of students serviced who reached at least half or more of their expected typical RIT growth by mid-year. So in other words, they met at mid-year like you saw Cindy do. If they were supposed to grow 6, did they get to 3 RIT growth bands or more? And it was 17% of reading, and this were the students that I worked with, had done that. And in math, 40% were successful. Then we went a little bit further, and it was % of students serviced who exceeded their end of the year typical RIT growth already by mid-year. And you can see that 38% had exceeded in reading, and 32% had exceeded in math. I was very excited when I saw that. I thought, all right, because you have to realize, and I'm sure you do, when you have a student struggling, they have so much more room to grow versus these students that are really right up here and they have to have some growth. And I think that this looks like the cluster classrooms, the teachers, and hopefully some of what they do in the talent groups are successful.
And these were 2 separate groups, so you'd have to add those 2 scores together to get how many met and or exceeded. So we didn't duplicate counts in those 2. So for instance, in math, it's what?
72.
Yeah, 72% of the kids either met or exceeded what we expected them to do by mid-year. So I think Jane wants to continue tracking, and I think it's a good idea that we track not only our struggling learners, but also those who we really want to exceed and see as our future leaders. So questions that you have?
I'll take one. So it sounds like with the advent of SAGE, back in the early years before a child qualified for Synergy, they went into tech. Talent enrichment classes, I think was what they were called. So now we've been able to expand that to higher grade levels, is what you're saying, for those non-level 1 students?
Basically, the talent groups are like what tech was or is, because I still do tech. And tech, like you said, very good, Eric, talent enrichment classes, and they were for 2nd graders. What this is, the talent idea is very similar. Still do tech, but then in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, if they don't qualify, for Synergy, I have certain items or certain classes that I offer to the Synergy students, and then open it up to all 4th graders, just like 2nd grade, and the teachers, we discuss and we get a group and work with them in those specific talent areas.
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Jane, I know that those numbers are really significant in that the higher level learners really don't grow that much. So obviously you've been making a huge impact on those rates of growth over this last year. If you had to say one thing that you thought was making a difference, is it the tracking, or is it something else you think, because you've been able to to have different kinds of groups?
Well, I would say a couple of things to that. One, I think that opening it up has been wonderful, in the sense that I have kids come down the hall now, and they'll say, when are we going to meet next? Which is wonderful to hear. They were very excited about it. Because unfortunately, you know, you come and you have to, you pick those that are identified, and students sometimes will say, why don't I, you know, but we're all different and whatnot. So that's really exciting. The thing that I feel has really made a difference is because we have that data available, and we do have the MAP scores now, and I honestly believe that when we as educators sit down and take a look at that data, it's like, whoa, because it does tell you where they're really at. So if you have a fourth grader that is already able to do, you know, in sense that what they would say is say seventh grade math, that does make you kind of go, we do need to challenge these students. And I believe that the teachers have stepped up in the classroom. I think that the cluster classroom is a great idea. And I love the ability to work with those talented groups. And we always said it was gifted and talented, and unfortunately, the talented maybe did not get as much as they could have, let's say, but now we have that available. So.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. And certainly it is not, you know, I think that, like you said, it's a result of many, many things, and I think that the teachers really were very excited about the fact that we could open it up to the entire grade level and work with those students that are showing great, you know, talent in that area. So, any more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, we're honored to have Mayor Janet Williams from Savage address us. While she's walking up, we've got a great partnership with the City of Savage. We meet with them, their full council, at least once a year, and have worked on a number of cooperative issues together. We have partnership agreements that we've worked on throughout the years to share equipment and facilities, and welcome, Mayor.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for inviting me here tonight. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to update you on all that is happening in the great city of Savage. I am excited to tell you that the city of Savage is stable and strong. I'm not only referring to our financial status, but our overall condition of the city. This is a direct result of our philosophy and the way that we operate, which was reflected in our naturally resourceful tagline. Many people may think that naturally resourceful refers to our outdoor surroundings, but with more than 35% of Savage being parkland, open space, and wetlands, rivers, and lakes, we certainly do care about our natural resources, but our tagline addresses more than that. What we mean by being naturally resourceful is that it is our organization's nature to maximize our resources, no matter if those resources are the skills, talent, and knowledge of our staff, relationships with our other entities, or more physical resources like our equipment, our money, and our property. Perhaps our tagline is best demonstrated in the fact that in 2010, the Business Week magazine named Savage the best affordable suburb in Minnesota. We were compared with other cities in areas of livability, education, crime, and economy. We were compared with other cities, and in announcing this designation, Business Week highlighted Savage's parkland, location, and education as the features that set our community apart from others. We know that these features didn't develop on their own, but rather through the hard work, dedication, and desire of those who have a stake in our city. Furthermore, a city survey conducted last spring produced high ratings for city services. In fact, most of those who completed the survey indicated, when asked, they would be willing to pay more taxes to maintain current services. And when asked to rate the quality of life in Savage, a whopping 98% said that it was excellent or good. And when asked about the schools in Savage, 82% gave them a positive rating. We recently completed a Citizens Academy in Savage. It was our first. I had the opportunity to give them their certificates when they completed that academy, and they also gave us very high marks once they understood how we really operated. More physical outcomes can be found throughout our 17 square mile footprint. I'll touch on a few that were realized over the past year and update you on those that are coming to fruition. And I'll also give you some insights into the initiatives for the rest of 2011. One of the most exciting projects for our community is the construction of a full-service medical center on the corner of County Road 42 and 27. It's right next door to Kells Market. Starting this summer, the Savage Medical Building will offer all basic health care services as well as specialty care and diagnostic services that we've currently had to find elsewhere. We're thrilled that St. Francis Regional Medical Center chose to expand its services and that Kells Market had the property available to make that vision happen. The completion of the new fire station on the City Hall campus was celebrated with outstanding turnout at the fire department's open house. This new facility was needed to enhance our response times to the northwestern part of the city. In the way of parks and open spaces, the city entered into an agreement that will provide land for the future expansion of Savage Community Park. We'll be increasing that by about 9 acres and extending a recreational trail along the city's bluff line. The Nature Conservancy purchased 25 acres of wooded land by the Credit River and the Fen that will be preserved in perpetuity and has been taken off the tax rolls. We opened a dog park in downtown Savage, and we replaced our playground equipment in accordance with our capital improvement plan. A number of transportation issues were initiated, with the most popular being our first roundabout. Located on the corner of 27 and Lynn Avenue, this replaced a traffic signal and has since improved the traffic flow and safety. Not too far from where Mr. Anderson lives. Additionally,
Really appreciate it.
Additionally, the city saw increased activity in the way of residential and commercial developments. A total of 1,024 permits were issued in 2010 compared to 780 in 2009. These projects included the first phase of the Dan Patch Trail development in downtown Savage that has 50 single-family units. Trace Water in South Savage has 13 units, and the final phase of Creekside near Red Tail Ridge Elementary School with approximately 25 new units. Excuse me. Before I move on to all that's happening in 2011, I think it's important that I discuss the status of our budget. I'm proud to say that our tax levy has remained flat for the last 3 years. This was achieved through conservative spending and difficult decisions, which included a reduction in staff hours in those areas where activity had decreased. But we did not decrease our police or fire budget. Our current staffing levels are the same as they were in 2005, having fallen by 7 FTEs since 2009. Following financial policies that aim to keep tax rates flat while still funding important projects, we were able to continue progressing as a city without significant impacts to property owners. For example, the city tax rate of an average home in Savage in 2011 is just $45 higher than it was in 2006. As we work hard to stabilize what we can for the taxpayers, we are striving to keep our community looking good and functioning well. Our goal is to avoid peaks and valleys when it comes to taxes, and that means that when old debt is paid off, new debt takes its place. The debt pays for capital improvement projects like park upgrades, road repairs, public improvements, facility renovations, and new equipment. In 2011, transportation projects dominate our capital improvement budget. All of the city's roadways will be affected, including the Highway 13-101 intersection, which will have a new interchange, and that's starting right now. Others to occur is the Highway 13 and Quinton Avenue realignment, 126th Street infrastructure replacement in downtown Savage, and of course you're well aware of the County Road 27 and 44 upgrade in South Savage. Additionally, the city is studying the concept of an indoor sports facility for use by our community youth sports organizations. We formed a task force to evaluate potential sites for the complex should the council decide to move forward. And we have asked that a representative be appointed from the 719 school district. As evidenced by the McCall Pond Learning Center at the Savage Community Park, grants have provided and will continue to provide wonderful opportunities. The city received a grant from the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council for Music in the Park every Wednesday. Previously, these concerts were funded by service organizations. Another grant added solar panels to the Environmental Learning Center for energy conservation. And the Jeffers Foundation provided a grant for a new sign out on County Road 27 to make it easier for folks to find the Environmental Learning Center. One more notable bit of news regarding the LC is that since February, the older members of our community have been meeting there each Tuesday under the guise of the Savage Social Club. Aimed at those 50 and older, the Senior Savage Social Club gathers from 10 to 1 every Tuesday for coffee and conversation. The volunteer-based club recently began offering weekly speakers on an array of topics and have been attracting between 30 and over 50 every Tuesday. Of course, coffee with the mayor drew the biggest crowd. Obviously, there's much happening in Savage involving many different groups on many different fronts. We're all working together to ensure that our city remains stable and strong, not just financially, but in all areas important to a thriving city. The ability to use our resources to get the job done effectively and efficiently is inherent to the City of Savage as an organization, but its philosophy extends beyond City Hall, the police and fire stations, and the Public Works building. It's an approach that we can see throughout our city. So on behalf of the City of Savage, I want to thank you, the school board, and all other members of your community for being partners for making our city great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will answer any questions that anyone has,
Any questions?
if you have any.
No, thank you. We appreciate
Okay.
you coming and giving a State of the City address.
I appreciate the opportunity.
I guess I do have one question.
Okay.
As we hear more about an economic recovery, are you starting to see that in your permitting and
We are.
other activity?
We are. I think our permits are almost at where they are this year, the first 4 or 5 months as they were for all of last year. And I know in the developments that I did point out, that one in downtown Savage, they had only started selling in March and had already pulled 10 permits. And I believe the Trace Waters one in South Savage is entering their second phase now too. So we are seeing that, and a little more commercial activity also.
Okay, good.
Okay,
Well, congratulations
Cool.
on the Newsweek.
thank you.
At this point in time in our agenda is a 15-minute period that we set aside for residents to address the board in open forum. Is there anyone that would like to address the board this evening? Seeing no one, we'll move to personnel items. Matt.
All right. Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Gruber. First, I would like to recommend the following employees, candidates for employment, and I'm seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion to seek the candidates for employment?
So moved.
By Tom, second.
Second.
By Todd. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Retirements, man.
And next, I would like to present the following retirements, and before, if I can just take a moment and read the names and the years of service there. We have Karen Barkley retiring from the high school after 25 years of service. We have Becky Hadima retiring as the Kids Company Coordinator after 14 years of service, and Linda Phillips, Technology Support, after 12 years of service to the district.
Do I have a motion to approve the retirements as presented?
I'll make the motion.
By Lee, second.
I'll second it.
By Mike. Any questions or discussion?
Well, I don't have any questions. I just want to comment that of these three women, I've had the pleasure of working with, some more than others, but over the years as a parent and now as a board member, and they're awesome ladies, and they will be missed. I'm kind of hoping Karen will come back and do graduation every year forever. She does a great job. I'm pretty sure Dave Lund is going to be a little lost for a while. And Becky's great, and Linda does an excellent job. So they will be missed.
Anything else? Sorry. Keep forgetting to look your way.
That's fine. I have also got to know all three of these women and know that the contributions they've made to our district are pretty legendary. And each of the buildings that they represent will certainly be missing them. As the Kids coordinator, Becky has been in all the buildings, so everyone knows who she is, as well as Karen, who is legendary for many things, including graduation, and dressing the board members to make sure everyone is just to the team, myself included. So they represent a tremendous gift to our district, and they will be sorely missed.
Okay. There's no other comments. I'll entertain a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries 7-0 with our gratitude.
All right. And next, I would like to present the following leaves of absence and of seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion to approve the leaves of absence as presented? By Stacy, second. By Lee. Any questions? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. And next, we have approval of the Jeffers Pond Principal Committee. Dr. Gruber. Or, I'm sorry, Matt.
I'll take it.
I should take it.
So you have before you the Jeffers Pond Principal Hiring Committee roster and timeline. And the one note that I'd just like to make is that there's a couple of areas in here where you can see that there's a to be determined written in. And I just wanted to explain that very quickly. We've had a little bit more lead time with some of our other principal hirings recently. We wanted to make sure that we got in the market when we still had great candidates out there. And so we accelerated this process slightly, so I wasn't able to get into Jeffers Pond to address that staff until Thursday of last week. And so that's the reason why there's a couple of gaps there, but we'll be filling those in shortly, and you can see the structure of the committee and the structure of the process is the same as it has been during when we were looking for our principal for both Grainwood and Glendale.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'll take a motion to approve the timeline and committee for the Jeffers Pond hiring.
So moved.
By Tom, second.
Second.
By Todd. Any questions? So I'm assuming the motion then would just allow us to fill in, and
Correct.
it won't come back to us at all.
Correct.
And who's going to be making those invitations to the parents and the staff?
I'll be making those invitations to the parents and staff, and that'll go out tomorrow morning.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Old business, major magnitude field trip. Mr. Hoag.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me come back for a second go around with this. In the packet that I have provided for you, there are a couple of emails from companies that I've sent out asking for other bids, and with the 2-week notice, they're really having a hard time. But I do want to point out the one from Keith Engdahl. He is the person that Keith Kulmos is traveling with the Italy group. And just to point out one of the things that he says, if your other tour company, meaning EF, says that you have received, can positively confirm a hotel in this period, and that's the time period that they're concerned about, June 20th through the 28th, because Wimbledon is also during that time, and it's also just before the Olympics. So that's why there's a bit of a crunch time for there are 3 companies that I've contacted. 2 of them have gotten back to me, one of them being this company here. And they said if you can't move the dates, then you're probably better off going off with EF Tours. So.
Okay. Let me start with a motion. Do I have a motion to approve the major magnitude field trip as presented?
I'll make the motion.
By Mike, second.
Second.
By Tom. Any questions? Mr. Hoag? So I'll start. So did you get price quotes, or just kind of looking at this right now?
All that I have received back from the 2 companies so far are what are included in the packet, are copies of the emails that they have sent to me.
Okay.
I appreciate your going back and taking the effort to look at other companies. I know it's a short time period, so I'm not surprised you don't have a lot of that money yet, information yet, but I do appreciate your efforts.
Yeah, their biggest problem is dealing with the hotels, being able to commit to a hotel and then being able to come up with a price quote for that hotel, especially this far out in advance. So.
Any other questions? Yes.
Jeff, are you still convinced that the EF is the best course of action for your field?
Definitely, especially with the background of the company itself, and also included in the packet it was a list of reasons that I had provided for why I wanted to also travel with EF. They've been around the longest. They've one of their primary considerations is the education aspect of this tour, and they only deal with student travel as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
One other question. I know last time we spoke about the retirement of one of your chaperones.
Yes, Mr.
Can you
Leonard.
address that?
Well, I have the 2 chaperones that will cover the 30 students, and that would be myself and Ms. Potter.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
And I'm assuming, Mr. Lund, you're comfortable with the proposal?
Okay. Seeing no other questions or comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Have a very good time.
Thank you.
Now we have a second major magnitude field trip. Ms. Hanson.
Good evening. Good evening. Bonsoir. I stand at this level. Yeah, lots of travel this year. I had no idea when I was considering this. So exciting plans for lots of students. I'm proposing a student trip to France next summer, the summer of 2012. And I'd like to mention that our 50-minute language classes are wonderful foundations to language learning, but I think a true immersion experience has to happen by going to the source of the language and by being immersed in the language. And you'll see the 2 companies, I've looked at several companies, but the 2 that I'm particularly interested in both do family stays, which provide the students with a true immersion experience learning the language and the culture. One example of a previous student who's traveled with me came back from the family stay saying, Madame Hansen, I dreamt in French for the first time. And that's a real sign that the students are truly thinking, living, dreaming the experience. And I believe that only happens by living in the country for, this is a short time, but it is a short little living experience in that country. What else would I like to say here? The family stay is a time when students practice the language on a daily basis. They're forced to do it. And believe me, they'll have a headache after that first day. It's so overwhelming and intense, but by the second, third day, they're getting much more comfortable with the experience and the language. They learn circumlocution, which is trying to get around the language, trying to figure out how to say it. If I don't know the exact vocabulary word, I'll just get around describing it by the words I do know. And in terms of the itinerary, I believe you have a copy of 2 detailed itineraries from a company called VIE, which is La Vie in French, which is life. I love their name. It's Vistas in Education, based right here in Minneapolis. Well, not here, but the local area, Minneapolis and in Paris. They've been around since 1976. And again, they emphasize the language and cultural experience. They have a trip organized for 15 days, and I wanted to get to that point. I know you have a max 14 days, so that'll come later, but 2 weeks approximately, where we spend 3 days in Paris, family stay for 5 days, and then another region. It may either be the northern route or eastern route, and I plan to allow the students to vote on their preference. Both of them are amazing tours, so they would provide us with an excellent trip. Transportation plans, flying from Minneapolis, and one nice thing about VIE again, and the other company that I've narrowed down, also based in Minneapolis, they plan flights from Minneapolis, whereas some companies plan from New York or Boston. They plan from our home, so it's not as expensive as it might be with other companies. So traveling from Minneapolis to Paris, we'll use the subway in Paris and tour the other region by bus. And I expect a group of about 10. I haven't gone through I haven't done any publicity yet, but once I get into that, I'm expecting 10 students. And with that, we would be teamed up with another school or 2 on the bus, because they can't provide a bus just for 10 of us. So we would be on a bus with 2 other groups, or 1 other group possibly. The cost you'll see, I know it's a summer trip, so prices definitely go up. VIE's price is, for the eastern route I'm looking at, is $3,845. And that's if we sign up by June 15th. So it's really important that we get the ball rolling this spring before school's out. And ISE, the other travel company, again, it's a student travel company. Both are nonprofits. Their price quote is $3,545 for the northern itinerary and $3,635 for the southern itinerary, again by June 15th. But I've discovered that price doesn't include the fuel surcharges. And nowadays, I don't know if you're familiar with tour groups, but they tack on big prices with the fuel surcharges, often towards the end of your payment experience. So VIE provides that right up front. That's included in their price. And that can be about $400 to $450. So that's why I think it's pretty equivalent in terms of the price. Plans for funding. And again, I'm following the policy 610 that for the major magnitude field trips. The plans for funding, it is students' responsibility, but I would definitely encourage and participate in fundraising. I've taken 1 other student trip at Prior Lake High School and 2 others at St. Louis Park High School, where I used to work. And we did some fundraising, but to be honest, I think students getting a part-time job is the best way, and saving money throughout this year. We have over a year to plan for it. It is an expensive trip. You have to start saving now, and fundraisers can help, but I'm not a real proponent of going with companies that take 60% of the profit and the students only get 40, selling candy bars or whatever it might be. But I would be supportive of that if students and parents are interested in fundraising. The tour company involved, again, Vistas in Education in Minneapolis, and ISE, also in Minneapolis, both nonprofit, both focus on language and culture. And again, that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking just for a tour of the country, but of a language immersion experience, okay, for the students. And let's see. I mentioned in my summary here. A request for modification. I saw in the policy that 14 days was the maximum number of days for a summer trip, and I would like to request a one-day extension of 15 days. You know, 2 of those days are really travel days, getting there and getting back, so it's really only 13 days, right? So to do the family experience and get the opportunity to tour Paris and another region, I think you truly need a full 15-day trip. Both the companies offer a 10-day trip or a 15-day trip, but not anything in between. And the 10-day trip is cheaper, but personally I don't think it's long enough. I find that adding a family stay into that, plus trying to get touring of a region and Paris, it's just too rushed. And 15 days is intense enough. I've also done a 3-week trip with students, and that I found was a little bit too long. Students started really missing home and feeling like, you know what, I'm ready to go home after about day 15, 16. So it was about perfect, I think. What else? Chaperones. I expect it will only be me because, as you probably know, the French program is smaller than Spanish and German, and in my previous trip, we had 10 signed up to go, and 2 students had to drop out, one for health reasons, one for, I think she just decided it was too expensive, and therefore I only had 8 students, so I expect a similar number. I'm hoping for 10. If I were to get 15 or more, I would definitely ask a school employee to be the other chaperone. I know there are other language teachers who would love the chance to go to France, or Mr. Hogue. Oh no, he couldn't go, he's going to England, but other language teachers would definitely be interested. I know Robin Gunning has mentioned to me before too. I'd love the chance to go to France, media specialist at the high school, so I don't think it'll be a problem if we get that number of students. Would you like a more detailed description of the itinerary? Or price inclusions?
Why don't we can skip the motion at this point, just go to questions.
Okay.
How are you going to decide between the 2 companies? Does one feel better to you than the other? Or?
Yes, I've traveled with VIE on 3 previous occasions, to be honest, and I'm going to read a few things about why I would prefer VIE over ISE. The prices are very similar, but VIE only does France, and they really know France. Their guides know France. They have official certified bilingual tour guides that accompany us on the trip, whereas most companies don't have that. You have to be certified by the French government to be an official guide, to get entrance into all the big museums, the chateau, everything. So it's important to have an official bilingual certified guide. VIE does not charge a membership. Some companies charge a membership for their travel groups. Their medical and cancellation trip insurance is included as soon as a student registers for the trip, and that's huge. So if you had to cancel, within a month or 2 or 3 or well into the trip, they give you a refund into that. And I think that's really important for students who have a change in plans or problems that occur. Medical insurance is covered in that as well. Flights are on regularly scheduled airlines, no charters. The airline fees, taxes, and fuel charges, like I said, are included in the program price, whereas ISE did not have those fees included in their program price. Quality hotels, they're all 2- and 3-star hotels in safe neighborhoods. Dinners, that's a big deal. The dinners are all included on the tour, and the family stay as well, of course. Some tour companies do not provide dinners for all the trips. So you find out, oh, day 5, day 10, day 15, I don't have dinner. And that could really add up if you haven't planned the price of dinners. Pre-departure materials are included. They have great supportive materials to help us plan ahead for the trip. All transfers in France, so if you had to take a train or change transportation in some way, they include that in the price. Oh, and the 2 capstones, I think, are a boat ride on the Seine in Paris the last night. That's included. Not many trip companies provide that, and a dinner at the Eiffel Tower the last night. And students have raved about that. We get to have dinner at the Eiffel Tower the last night to say au revoir de Paris. So really great way to end the trip. So I definitely am leaning toward Vistas in education, to be honest. It's not a hard choice.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, Rich.
Talk to me about this family stay that you do. Are these families vetted?
Yes.
And do we have a history of students staying with families in sponsored trips?
I don't know.
Because normally they stay at hotels.
I know the German trip definitely, does family stays, and I've done them on every trip I've taken. A family stay experience, like I said, is the way that students truly learn the language and culture. I'll tell you what VIE does. They screen all families first with their English teachers. So the way they find these families are students in France taking English who want to improve their English and introduce the French culture to an American student. So they invite an American student to live with them for those 5 days. So the English teachers first are the first point of meeting the students and their families, and then a telephone interview, and finally a face-to-face meeting, and then an orientation with the families. And I thought you might ask that, about a criminal background check, but I discovered, and through VIE, that it's only allowed through a lawyer or police to get a criminal background check of a family for us to do that. So no, they do not do criminal background checks. But I'll read a little bit of another example from Vistas. They said every summer they find 1,200 family stay placements for their American students traveling to France, and they have maybe 5 per summer that need a change. Like a student doesn't feel happy or comfortable. And what I tell my students, if they don't feel comfortable right away, to call me, because I'm on call 24 hours a day. I stay in Paris while they're in their family stay in Paris. They don't feel comfortable right away for any reason to call me, and they have backup families to switch right away. Because we want that experience to be a wonderful, true, amazing learning experience for them. So I have not had any troubles in the past with family stays. And VIE, like I said, they don't have troubles except for just occasional students asking to change a family. But that could happen to anyone, just not getting along, not clicking with the family. Students also have the opportunity now with the internet to meet the family ahead of time, to email, to Skype, to write letters if they choose to do that with the family well in advance. Okay?
Thank you.
I have a comment, I guess. This is like deja vu. When I was in high school, I was able to go on a trip to France, and we stayed with the family and did the whole thing. And I would agree, we were only there 10 days, and it was not quite long enough.
Oh,
but
thank you.
I was starting to get a little homesick after that time, too. But the fabulous experience, you're absolutely right. You learn so much more about the culture and the people while you're there. And I stayed with a family. They had a girl that was similar in age to me, and she was taking English, and I was all excited that, oh, good, because my French was okay, but I thought she speaks English. Well, I get there, well, she had a British English, and we didn't communicate real well that way. A lot more sign language type things, but it was a fabulous experience, and I'm glad you checked with a couple different companies and you've done your research. I'm fully in support of this trip, and I wish I could go with.
Thank you.
I'd love to go back there.
Oh,
Hope you go to
great.
Mont Saint-Michel.
Well, that is an amazing. That's the second most visited place in Paris, or in
it's
France
beautiful.
after the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah.
So that is a great place. Thank you for that comment. It is an amazing
And
experience.
the family environment was very safe. I mean, granted, it was years ago, but it was very safe, and
they
they
provide
checked everybody out
I
real
don't know
well.
if you've ever, when you stayed with them, did you have amazing food on
Wonderful.
top of it? The
Yes.
French really
We were
do
eating
know
all
how
the
to
time.
cook. So that's a
Yes.
treat for American students to experience.
What age student do you, or
I'm
which
sorry, I
grade?
wanted to get Stacy real quick.
Good.
Jill, I was just wondering, how many kids are eligible, and how many sections of
Right.
French do we have?
I offer it to all my students after at least 1 year of French.
Okay.
And I encourage them to have had 2. Just from experience, I think students after 2 years feel more comfortable and are willing to take more risks with the language than after 1 year. But I do open up to French 1 as well, just because I don't have a big program, and to get 10 students, I need to offer it up to everybody. And when the students come back, I have to tell you, they are so excited and more comfortable and confident in their language skills that it flows right into the next year of French. So it really helps energize them and the class. It's a great thing for all of us.
Yes, Tom.
Spacey.
All right. I had your wonderful daughter Danielle in my world language class. So I tell students every 4 to 5 years I'll plan a trip, so that at one time during your high school experience,
She got
hopefully
the
you'll have a
24-hour tour of Paris. 2
Right,
weeks
and
ago.
thank you for the magazines and newspapers you sent with her.
We learned a lot about the magazines and the newspapers over there, how it's very, which propaganda do you want? It's very segregated, so hopefully we chose correctly.
Oh, yeah, we have our propaganda here too, but that's right. It exists there. Yes.
Any other questions? Yes, Tom.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, well, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the major magnitude trip as presented and discussed.
Make the motion.
By Lee, second. By Rich. Any other questions? All mine have been
We
answered.
needed a motion to change the policy, the school policy,
Oh,
with the extension.
Very good. Is that a part of your motion is
Yeah,
is to approve the
as
extension
she's
of
presenting
policy?
it.
Okay.
For the 15 days? Okay, thank you.
And Rich, I assume that's consistent with your second?
Correct.
Good. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you, merci. Au revoir.
I guess it should have been we.
I took Spanish. Approval for voice over IP bid, Mr. Holmberg.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Dr. Gruber. I am here tonight to bringing forward a bid recommendation for board approval to move forward with a new communications project for voice over IP, data network switches, and implementation services. You have the information in your board packet, but I'll be doing a brief overview this evening on those recommendations. There are three parts to this presentation, really a project overview, review process, and a committee that was put together to look at this, the subsequent recommendations I'm seeking approval on, and the pending timeline for this project. During the past school year and even this past fall, we spent a great deal of time reviewing and doing an analysis of our current telephone and network capabilities, and we identified a few areas of need. One of which is our current telephone equipment in some areas of the district approach and exceed 10 years of experience, or excuse me, 10 years of age, which we've noticed some issues as a result of that equipment. The design of the district's telephone communications network has been added on to several times with additions of new schools, new sites. As a result, we do have some issues of connectivity across the district. Presently, our district has 1 gig connection points to the DSC and all the other school sites. Looking forward and looking at what we are presently using, we are maxing out in many circumstances because of those limited connection points, maxing out the amount of what we can do on the network, and so we're looking at a 10 gig connection point for increased technology demands in the future, and really in the present. And presently, as a result of our current phone system, we have multiple costs associated with maintaining the current phone system. When some of our equipment goes beyond 6 or 7 years, you lose the ability to have service contracts. Some of those hardware become obsolete or end of life, and when there are issues as a result of that, you typically cannot find the parts, or it takes a longer period to find those parts. A couple other things too is we did have a few episodes last year where we had some issues with our communications, which kind of brought forward some of the urgency of this type of need. As a result, we did convene a committee called the VoIP Committee. Not a real exciting name, but nonetheless, came together to really look at the oversight, review, and analyze next steps associated with this process and a subsequent RFP project. When we began this, we really saw a need, but we really needed to understand what our current capabilities were, as well as look at what does this type of project entail. And so as you look at this group, it's myself, Julie Sink, Tom Anderson, Walt Schweer, who's our district network specialist, Dot Berggren, technology support specialist. We did have a